Kamusta? Welcome. I'm Ricardo Abad, Artistic Director of Arate, and your host for this episode of Talakayan. In this session, we will be imagining what Philippine theater will be like in the future. And why is it important to imagine? Because if we want to see change happen in the future, we must be able to imagine what the change will be like now, right here in the present. And that's what we will do for the next hour or so, with a little help from our friends. In many parts of the world, the Philippines included, theater has been opening up to live performances and live audiences. And the initial results have been favorable. Many people line up for the theater. We hear reports of full houses, and we have reports of brisk theater sales. But what will happen to the theater when all this excitement dies down? What will happen when people start to take theater more seriously? Will we simply replicate what took place before, or will we see some changes? You see, the pandemic exposed us to many gross inequalities in the globe today. As Michael Jackson, who is a theater maker, but not the pop star, said, it's like sort of walking into the kitchen one night and you turn on the lights and you see all these cockroaches looking at you, and rather than skitter away, the cockroaches stay and look at you, stick out their tongue and defiantly say, we're gonna stay here. Okay, and how will that awareness affect how we stage plays, how we produce plays, how we market plays, how we get our audience to entertain? And there are also things going on in the world today. The elections, the Ukraine-Russian crisis. How will all of this affect the theater that we are doing? And how will all these forms, this action, these activities, this awareness affect how we train our students? So today, I invited young theater makers who are teachers as well to discuss this topic with me in this session. And with me are, first, Guelan Luarca of the Ateneo Theater Arts Program, Department of Fine Arts, who is also a playwright, an actor, a director, a dramaturg, and everything nice about the theaters. Next is Catherine May Sabate, or we call her Katte Sabate, who is the Academic Affairs and Assistant Director of Performing Arts at the Guang Ming College in Tagaytay. Katte is a theater arts graduate of the University of the Philippines in Diliman, and is also a playwright and a dramaturg. I hope we get the chance to work with her someday. Here on my left is Neil Arke Azcuna, who is a production manager of the Integrated Performing Arts Guild of the Mindanao State University Iligan Institute of Technology. Arke is also a dramaturg and a teacher at MSU, and I don't know him very well. Perhaps after this session, we get to know him better. Okay. So, good morrow, friends.
Good morrow.
Good morrow. Much thanks for joining me in today's session. And before we have the conversation proper, I'd like to ask each of you a question, and this will start the discussion rolling. Take notes. And what I want to do is I want you to give me an image of what you see Philippine theater will be like in the future. I'll give you about a minute or so to just discuss that, and we'll go around the table. And then let's see how that can stimulate our discussion in the future. Anybody wants to start? So it's like a sentence completion formats, like, I imagine Philippine theater to be whatever, ... and boom. I learned that from my psychology class. Okay, who wants to start the thing?
Sir Guelan.
Ay, tinuro ka.
Thank you, Sir Neil. Okay, so the image of Philippine theater in the future. For some reason, the image that I see in my head is the character from 1001 Arabian Nights.
Shahrazad.
Yeah.
Okay.
A sense of urgency in telling our stories, or else we die.
Okay.
I think the pandemic kind of highlighted our crises in terms of disinformation, historical revisionism, and even the pandemic itself, like kind of challenged our parang perception of what is true, how do we survive, what information do we need. So I think Philippine theater in the future will answer that crisis through having a sense of urgency in how we tell our stories. And it is not only for the humanities or academic achuchuchu. Now it's life and death.
Very good. Thank you. I like that, Guelan. Thank you. Anybody else want to continue?
But I think more than
Katte?
the life and death and the urgency, actually, inisip ko kanina kung mandala ba, ganyan. Wow, ganyan. Colors, bani, ganyan. Tapos spiritual, ganyan. But more than the mandala is the silence of weaving our own stories from different parts of the Philippines. Kasi we have, lagi kong naririnig, no, during the pandemic, na this is my truth, this is my canon, respect my opinion, ganyan. Pero, bukod sa ganun, hindi kasi mag-isa yung paghabi, kagaya ng banig, kagaya ng tela, at iba't iba yung image na nabubuo doon. And it takes collaboration and working together of communities to create such beautiful pattern. And I think, kaya ko din naisip yon because yung strength ng visual arts to stay there and be immortalized na habang kahit na dumadaloy na yung mga henerasyon, nagkukwento pa din ang isang hinabing tela o ang isang hinabing banig na binuo ng magkakasama ng mga tao sa komunidad. So more than the resistance is that working together, maybe in silence, maybe in a song, at pagbuo noong imagery na ito na magtutuloy-tuloy sa pagdating ng panahon.
Salamat. At pwede natin ihabi yung dalawang points ninyo actually in the whole quilt. Neil, from you.
For me, sir, actually, I will be very specific. Now, I see Philippine Theater in a poster with a Discord link. Because I believe now with the advent of digital theater that we have recently added in our arsenal of expressions, we will be very wildly experimental in the way we shift our performance into different platforms, making it more immersive because so now even our instructions, even our academic institutions have gone through shift in new modalities. So I believe that this can be a very immersive experience also and very democratic because these are the languages of our audience right now. Discord link, Zoom, things like that. So we have to be very also conscious of this one. And this will definitely give us a wider reach of audience because as you can see, digital theater, for example, gives more access to audiences which are not our usual theater goers. These are people outside of the universities and inclusion that is beyond the typical live theater. So I'm expecting theater that's more, fleshing out a theater that's more democratic, grounded, and even very socially relevant. No.
Yes, and I guess the young people will be much into it, right?
Yeah,
because
yeah,
they have learned a lot from the pandemic. Before we continue the discussion, let us listen to some clips made by some of our elders, some of our teachers, who are members of the Association of Philippine Theater Schools. We asked them to give a statement of what they imagine Philippine theater will be like in the future. It'd be interesting to compare what they have to say with what the young theater makers have to say. So, if the clips are ready, let us play them. Everybody can hear them, and maybe our panelists can listen to them, take notes, and react to some of the statements they make.
One practice that has been discovered or rediscovered by theater organizations during the pandemic that I think will continue on even when we go back to face-to-face performances is the streaming of performances through online platforms. I think that it has been proven that the streaming of performances accomplishes two things. One is that it expands the audience that is able to reach the performances of the theater organization. At the same time, it makes available to more audiences the ability to access performances that they would not have otherwise been able to because of geographical limitations. So it becomes incumbent, therefore, for theater organizations to make sure that their performances are recorded in such a way that they can be transmitted effectively and feasibly on online platforms, and at the same time that the performance is documented in such a way that it captures still the essence of the theatrical performance.
The pandemic has forced us to stop and reflect on our lives, our relationship with others, our existence. The lockdowns challenged artists. So many questions came to mind. How are we going to make a living? How do we make sense of what is happening? How can we create and perform again? Time and again, theater has survived against all odds, whether it's a plague, famine, war, or a dictatorship. Artists are resilient. We explore, adapt, and continue to create amidst adversities. The pandemic pushed us to learn new skills and adapt to technology. Some became all around artists as they performed and created on their own. What will Philippine theater be like after the pandemic? Artists need to stay healthy, physically and mentally, to confront challenges in the future. We continue to adapt and respond to our ever changing environment. We continue to create, communicate, and connect. We may perform online or on site, individually or collectively. The bottom line is we create and perform for a reason, and we offer it to our fellow Filipinos. Philippine theater will continue to reflect the realities of the Filipinos. The show must go on.
Performance is intrinsic to life. We all perform to survive. This is a human, thus cultural need. Theater will never disintegrate. The pandemic was a transition, a palate cleanser to neutralize the taste fatigue that has overwhelmed our productions. Pandemics and major disruptions far worse than we have gone through have hounded human history. Many of humanities' best works were created during these times. Macbeth, King Lear, Antony and Cleopatra, even in science, Newton's law of gravity. The iconic The Scream by Edvard Munch and Boccaccio's The Decameron, among many, many others. Crises allow us to see beyond our satiated conditions, rousing us from our apathies, allowing us deeper meanings, and making us realize that life is a constant struggle. Like our complacent lives suddenly jolted, the pandemic confronted conventionality. Our theater, staled by repetition and contentment, pandering to mere entertainment. The disorder opened life's meanings, exploring innovation through new modalities, new meanings, new experiments, new representations. So will be our theater in the post-pandemic.
Thank you very much. You know what Dennis said about online technology and online theater, and hinted at by Professor Bonifacio and Dr. Fernandez, jives in what Neil was trying to say earlier. And it raises the question of, if there will be a lot of online theater, will that make theater venues less used in the future? Will be relying less on the physical theater or stage theater, or will that be a complement to all of these? What do you think of that? Maybe Neil, you can start answering that because you began.
Yes, sir. For me, I believe that no, the physical and live theater will not go away. It will still stay. Likewise, just like, for example, Andy Warhol democratized visual arts and the coming in of the digital arts, but a lot of people are still doing traditional painting because it's part of their expression. So I think live theater will still be there. And we should not look at it as if one supersedes the other. It actually makes us more transmedium, more experimental, and a theater having no limits, things like that.
But I know many traditional theater artists do not like the online format. And when it started to appear during the pandemic, we're saying, oh, this is just a fad, and we really want the live thing and things like this. But they were saying that there's kind of mutuality there. What are your thoughts on that in terms of the venue and stuff like that?
I think it'll take. I mean, coming off from the point that some traditional. I won't judge them with the term traditional. Some artists don't seem to feel at home in the online format. I think it naturally will take some time before audiences even get used to it. But when the pandemic struck, we were adamant in Tanghalang Ateneo. We were adamant that we had to continue telling stories, working, encouraging especially students to create. But we're adamant in making a point that online performance is not a derivative of live theater. It is its own. It's a different creature, no. But I think it will take time before audiences accept that. So I think the online medium should continue exploring, discovering, even as we slowly come back to live theater. But maybe it's because I'm in a jaded, cynical mood, and I think you will understand why. There's something about online theater, online performance, that I think we should be nuanced about it because there's a fear in me. Naku, correct me if I'm. There's a fear in me that this is becoming like one of those parang resilience myth about the Filipinos, no? Na parang neoliberal. Wag natin, kung ako yung gobyerno, hindi ko masyadong gagalingan yung pandemic response kasi nagta-thrive naman sila.
Kasi kaya nyo naman.
Oo. And I think ganoon kapag iniisip ang online as a derivative of live theater. Kailangan, kung yung artist, multifaceted na siya, kaya niyang mag-online, kaya niyang mag-on-site. Sana yung online, it's its own discipline and may sarili siyang aesthetics. Kasi pag offshoot lang siya nito, para siya naging excuse na i-delay natin.
Parang bastard child.
Oo, parang ganyan ang trato. So that to me disturbs me.
Yeah.
Sa tingin ko po, bagamat nagsimula kasi yung online kasi nga wala tayong choice, diba? Nasa kwarto tayo. At wala namang libro how to do online.
Walang precedent.
Walang guidebook. Unlike the theater na panahon pa ni Aristotle, alam mo yun, na ganito dapat. However, bukod sa theater practitioners, napansin ko sa observation, kasi nga nasa bahay lang naman ng pandemic, ganyan, may mga wala sa kultura nilang manood ng theater dahil nga sa transmedium ay nakakapanood at nakakapakinig ng mga dula sa online.
Yes.
At dahil doon, excited sila. Aside from us who are practicing and teaching theater, those who are not, who are used to movies and TVs, they became excited na, pag nagbukas na ang tanghalan, gusto kong manood. Kaya sa palagay ko, bukod doon sa may panibagong breed or kung ano man ang tawag sa kanya, version 2.0 ng pagtatanghal, ay nabubuksan, nagiging bukas yung pagtatanghal, hindi lamang sa mga taong sanay at mga artistang nasa teatro, kundi napapakilala siya. Kasi kung na Facebook, prangkahan na, libre. Kapag pupunta ka sa physical theater, ay mahal, Netflix na lang.
Yes.
Diba? Pero dahil na-excite sila na, ay, ganyan pala kasaya. Kumakanta sila yung sabay-sabay with voicing. Ganyan. So, excited na sila ngayon na magpunta.
So, bilang online theater can be a spur, a trigger to watch live performance.
Watch live. And a new medium.
Yes.
But eventually there must be a course on online digital theater eventually
class,
in the class,
eventually.
because now we're learning a lot of this. Neil,
Yes, you're right, sir. Now, there is some kind of ambivalence towards digital theater. Not only the traditional theater people, even the young people, young generation, are very very ambivalent of this. The fear, what kind of monster it would create. We have created on this one. But we should not simply just look at it as its form. We should look at it as the kind of representation it gives us. Because this will, as what Ma'am Katte said, this will really bring us closer to these audiences that we have right now. And in this day and age, I believe it's the most effective tool that we have right now. Because you are dealing with an audience that have normalized the virtual as not only an invasive part of their life, invasive kasi you wake up, you open the Facebook, so, but it's their platform right now to express their identity, their representation, and even their participation with public discourses. So we, as meaning-making people, we should really be conscious of this one and harness it in our own standards also. So yes.
And speaking of representation, that brings us to the other question of now we have the form, the online form, but what kind of stories, what kind of theater, what kind of tones, what subject matter will they take? Professor Boniface talked about many experiments that will take place. What sort of experiments do you see, and what sort of stories do you want to see? All right, from this point, anyone would like to talk about?
Siguro like online, I will also take off with what Neil was saying na we have to create some level of standard or even though kahit naman hindi standard pero know ways how to use it well if not properly kasi para siyang internet. Before the coming of the internet, we cannot express our opinions through status messages and tweets. Ganon din yung pagtatanghal. Na parang lahat ng tao pwede nang makibahagi sa pagtatanghal without us knowing kung ano ba yung ipupush forward nila na ideas. And agenda. So it's both exciting and scary at the same time because anybody can now create a Facebook performing arts group. Hindi na siya bawal at libre ito at bukas ito sa lahat. So, kung ano yung kwento, exciting kasi pwede tayo makarinig ng kwento as far as Sulu, Tawi-Tawi, mula sa North and Luzon. Kasi dati, mas alam ko pa siguro ang K-drama kaysa sa kwento ng bayan nila sa Romblon. So ngayon na mayroon na platapormang virtual, maaari nang makapagbahagi yung hindi natin kadalasan nakakapag-exchange ng thoughts and stories.
And in fact, coming from NCR, parang it's about time na we kind of shut up na. Kasi parang give space for other regions. And if we're gonna use the precedent of the internet as sort of like a possible trajectory of online theater, there's once again, the jaded, cynical part of me, takot nga, because kung susundan ng online theater yung narrative na nangyari sa internet and social media, nakakatakot yung pupuntahan niya. Yung parang you can, di ba parang everyone has an air of, ano ba to, parang legitimacy na ano. So yung ganun, kabilaan talaga siya na, right now, siguro I'm just in a cynical.
I believe the fear will always be there, sir. Wasn't it Katy Perry who said that whatever doesn't kill you makes you stronger, diba? So if these things does not destroy us, it will probably make us more resourceful, make us more adaptive and stronger than ever. Because I believe that this should be the course that theater will take in the future.
Like what Sir Steve said, that transitions.
Yes, I love that.
I love the transitions. I love the creation of beautiful things or things during adversities and crisis. So, laging may fear kasi like what I've observed and I have experienced as an actor online and then going back to the physical theater, iba talaga. Kasi online, ito So yung mukha ko ganyan lang. So pagbalik mo sa physical, yung paano na nga ulit ginagamit yung katawan?
To relearn everything.
So it's a different criteria, ibang rubrics, ibang guidebook when doing online and physical. However, the stories are stories.
They're the same,
Kung saan man siya pina-perform, maaaring magkaiba ng paraan kung paano dapat. Pero boses at boses pa rin ito ng mga taong nagkukwento.
In terms of form, parang isa sa pag-consume ko ng online performances, tapos na-experimento ng ilan sa mga estudyante din, yung idea na, kunyari, sa stage kasi, di ba, the thinking is when you're in the theater, narrative, no? Sequence of events, ganyan. Using the formal qualities you have sa visual dynamics, light, everything. Sa online, parang one framework to use is user experience, no? So kumbaga yung sinasabi ni Sir Neil na immersiveness, no, na the story, the narrative is tactile. You can navigate your way around the story. So just like the the internet is horizonmatic. Diba? Parang
Yeah,
kumakalat
it's
siya
very
ganyan.
expansive. It will really
Expansive,
expand our horizon.
Parallel, hindi sila linear.
It even revisits our concept of the proscenium.
Exactly. Exactly.
Because-
Macha-challenge lahat.
Yeah, the physical
Notions
space.
na
Yeah, and the individual knowing all tasks in the theater.
Exactly.
For example, you're just shooting at home, Zoom. You have to be your own makeup artist. You have to be your own lights designer. You have to be your own props manager and
Yes.
costume. However, kailangan mo pa rin makapag-collaborate dun sa mga ka-Zoom mo. And yung transmedium na bilib po ako sa mga bata kasi
Yes.
yung learning OBS, which is actually used for TV. And then, I tried downloading. I tried talaga, my best. Ganyan. So, naintindihan ko lang kung paano siya gawin, pero laging, kaya mo na yan, ha? So, you get to trust more and learn more na parang, okay, sanay ako sa traditional and I'm doing a virtual performance tomorrow. Merong mga tao na mas may kaya kesa sa akin. So, it's also a humiliating experience for
You know
me.
what's interesting is that we always say that theater is a mirror, that we hold a mirror, the Shakespeare. The audience is a mirror of society. But in this format, it's not a mirror anymore that we're showing society. We're trying, everybody sort of creating the image or the message in all of this. So it's a different, not really just a mirror you look at, but a mirror you continually create, actually, an experience.
That's what Sir Steve actually said, sir. It becomes almost mythic
Yeah.
what we are doing. It goes out of the realm of even the virtual. It goes to the mythical.
Yes.
No?
And do we see any of those things occurring now? You see, when you talk about change in the future, it's not something that will come out of the blue. There are beginnings now of these things that we see. Do you see these things emerging now, this expansive, this format? Do you see the beginnings of that taking place? I know we have a lot of online things, but they're all just attempts, desperate attempts to do theater at that
Desperate
point
attempts,
because it was the pandemic. But now it seems like what we're talking about is a genre of its own, so to speak. You know? But and when we're seeing some examples of that's going on. Right?
I have been following this dramaturg. In fact, they have this group, no? the Misfits Theater Company, Brooklyn-based group. I've been following for most of lately. There's this dramaturg, Gage Tarleton, if I'm correct with the name. His recent experiment is doing theater in OnlyFans.
Oh.
Are you familiar with OnlyFans?
Am I? Yes.
And what he did was he tried to lure people up with the promise of sexual work, things like that. And we know what OnlyFans is and the kind of eye of the storm that it caught up last year because of its content. And then he tried doing it. He conducted a series of monologues within his
Interesting.
OnlyFans account. Now, which
So parang ang PR niya ay sexual
oh
content.
yeah, he would really lure the
pornography.
people. No? Lure
Tapos
the
magti-theater siya.
Yeah, when they open up in
Sana
his
all.
account, they would see a different kind of nakedness instead of physical. He would start asking questions about his existence, who he is, things like that. So it really
Where
kind
it
of stir
might
up the consciousness of the people. So I believe that should be how we engage with the audience
definitely.
right now.
Definitely.
As dramaturgs, as people who really have this kind of moral standards. That we have.
Can you imagine an internet user na bored lang, in need of something, of sexual satisfaction, nag-OnlyFans, tapos hindi siya handa, yun lang ang habol niya. Tapos pag ano niya, may performance pala. You catch your audience at such a vulnerable state.
Yeah.
Ang ganda.
Sana all.
Ang ganda.
But there's a
I was
different
really
kind of theater
mind-blown.
already, right?
Yes.
A very different form. Away from the physical stage, but into the existential life.
Yes.
But where does the macro come in? Where does society come in? We're talking about personal expressions of personal angst, personal identity, a voice from the province, from things like this. But how does the macro come in the micro? How does the existence of the awareness of inequalities, the political setup, the daily struggle because of economic policies, the land tenure system, how does that come into the thing? Now we're going to have a water crisis. How will theater respond to this and things like? How do you see that? how does the macro come in the micro in the future anyway? Will people be more aware of that? Or do people still like the distraction of musical comedies? I remember in Singapore when the theaters opened, they wanted to make money because it's a very expensive venue. So they showed Tartuffe, comedy or something like this, and the importance of being earnest, classical things, and with us, because they have to make money.
Yeah.
But that's not what theater is, really. I mean, we're talking about a different form and different subject matter. So, any reaction to that in terms of the macro and the micro? Is that part of the storytelling, the things like this? What is the political significance, the macro significance of the fans club and things like that? What do you think about that?
Okay, it's difficult to answer. Like, okay, kung online content, let's say online theater, parang if you're gonna make performances, the tendency so far of what students, for example, have been doing, kasi students ang pinaka-aggressive sa online theater making, di ba? Laging di ba? Laging may advocacy. Madalas may advocacy, may pinaglalaban. So I think they are politically engaged. Ang mas interesting na question sa akin, Rix, is actually reception. Like, do audiences, do Facebook, social media users actually care? Because, for example, an admission, of course, hindi ako ang target market yata, pero meron akong fatigue for online content. So, it takes a lot, for example, for my attention para makuha. Dahil, bagong-bago yung experimentation ng bata. I love it. Pero kung siya yung usual Zoom, di ba, ganyan-ganyan, acting mag-isa, may kapagguran. So, hindi ko alam kung tawag nito, pero ako lang naman yun. So, hindi ko alam kung enough kaya yung ginagawa natin para mag-reach sa wider audience. Lalo na kung may urgency yung narrative pag may ina-advocate, may political issue na binibring up. Kasi I am tempted to think right now, syempre, di ba, patong-patong ngayon ang mga political issues natin. I'm tempted to think that the entertainment value that we get when we're tired after a long day's work, we open YouTube, we just want to watch mukbang, comedy skits, and stuff like that, yung mga biases natin sa K-pop. I think kailangan sakyan yun. We have to entertain. I think it's time for us to parang baba sa moral high ground na maging yung didactic and I think let's embrace entertainment. Stop looking at it as an idiotic thing, but rather that's our weapon, weaponize internet entertainment.
Yeah, also not only entertain but also melodrama.
Exactly.
Melodrama. I remember in India when I was there was a professor who was writing a book on melodrama precisely because she wanted to understand the form and how that form can really relate more to people. So anyway,
Since we're talking about form, baka kasi hindi naman kailangan maglagay ng demarcation where intellectual and entertainment ay naghihiwalay. Kasi even the boredom, pwedeng tayo nabobore. Pero yung hindi ba natin kaedad na araw-araw ay nakaharap sa computer ay nabobore? Kasi baka hindi. Kaya kailangan maging bukas sa iba't ibang experimentation ng form, mixing things together, and try not to be afraid and see whatever works. Parang ganun. Kasi kunwari, I was thinking about, what if there could be a 4-room theater which is virtual? We're talking about advocacies, issues, social injustices. What if it's possible to do it virtual rather than doing it on-site where people can actually engage? Na, diba? Paano kung pwede? Baka pwede.
You're right, sir. No, we should really make this as our new weapon and harness this one, because in the case of internet as a platform now for the people, now we have been swept under the rug by these propaganda machines that have really rooted in the social media. And in this day and age, social media is king. The internet is king. So we either succumb to it or we harness it into our own advantage. And this is part of our creed as artists, as cultural worker, to really steward the people towards a higher order in which we believe is our direction. So we should really harness this one.
I agree, but let me pick up on that entertainment. Yung sasakyan natin yung yung entertainment form and other forms. The words of Rolando Tino kind of hit me when he was in the 70s when he was criticizing Philippine movies and Philippine script playwriting and script writing. He was saying, ang kulang sa mga dula natin noon ay walang tension, walang drama. Yung mga protagonists ay hindi equally strong. So nawawala yung laban. So ang lumalabas, just becomes good and evil. Kasi alam mo naman sino mananalo. But so, nagiging predictable. Dapat yan, sabi niya, parang basketball game. Two opponents of equal strength, struggling moment to moment on how they will win. So maybe and basketball is so entertaining. And maybe that's one way I think we can ride the entertainment is to create that kind of dramatic tension, whether it's over politics or individual things or conflict within themselves. But so it comes out to playwriting. Does it come to that? The writing of the future of writing, is it online writing or physical theater, in-person writing? Does it come down to writing, where we start our work? Or does it come to telling stories? Does it begin with the play? So playwrights still have a role to play in the future of this.
Sana naman.
Yeah, of
Kung
course.
hindi, wala na ako.
I guess no, as artists, we are responsible for our craft, and we should be very socially aware of what's going on, and that's part of our what you call this, materials that we're going to use. And I believe, sir, that in this time and age, we more than ever we should really voice out the inequalities that have been really glaring in our midst, and we should really again the concept, the idea that there should be some tension in our writing, do away with the complacency of entertainment and even melodrama. We should really confront real issues and really even confront mortality itself, to really shake the yoke of anti-intellectualism that is very much common in right now.
That also reminds me, Rick, when you were quoting Tino, aesthetics still matter. So for example, the technology more than ever is very, very available. There are generations that are more adept to it than others, right? So for example, when I look at my students, there's almost nothing they cannot do. But if I look at it from the perspective of an educator, yung responsibilidad pala ay hindi so much to tell them how to do things, but what to do. Not tell them, but teach them what to do. So for example, it's still values formation. In the end of the day, it's still values formation, it's still aesthetics, it's still teaching them how to be effective communicators, diba? How to know their audiences and how to speak to them. So I think because technology, ways and means are so available, more than ever, educators must focus on basically the humanities part of theater.
Yes.
Right? Because
Reinforce it more.
Reinforce it more, right? So, stories, narratives. So, tama si Tino, I think. Going back to, classical writing, but framing it not only as museum pieces, but rather, ayun na nga, balik ako dun sa point na urgent, life and death siya.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And discourse siya.
Discourse.
Hindi
Precisely.
siya yung magtuturo ka na
Ito yan.
ABC,
Oo.
ganito mo gawin. It should always engage not only the collaborators, yes, playwrights hopefully would still be important, but again, playwriting could also be collaborative,
Precisely.
like including the audience now.
Yes.
Which is, I think, is important na dinala din ng pagdating ng virtual kasi ang bilis nilang mag-react na
Yes.
nakakaiyak, ganyan, habang
Yes,
umiiyak
yes.
pa lang yung eksena, na nakikita natin kung paano pwedeng mag-evolve. Now, my question is, posible pa ba na maging universal ang audience? Yun talaga, kanina pa tumatakbo sa isip ko na. Kasi, what if playwriting for the young generation doesn't need to be narrative anymore? Paano kung images na lang siya? Tapos yung totoo yung gumagano na lang talaga, di ba? Tapos nagigets nila. Pero yung older generation or yung generation na nasanay sa
Well-made play.
naunang paraan or naunang form ng theater, never nila yan magigets. Pero yung younger generation, gets nila. A play made of emojis level. Diba? So, yun talaga yung tanong ko na parang same advocacy, pero posible pa kaya na meron pang isang paraan na sa palagay ko naman, sinagot ko yung tanong ko, na never naman nagkaroon ng isang paraan kung paano lumikha ng pagtatanghal.
Yes, pinaalala nga sa atin ni Sir Tibo, di ba, na medium is meaning. Right? So kung ano yung meaning na gusto mong i-create, that will dictate what medium your message will take on, right?
And more than telling stories, I think it is, now we have come to a point that it is more important to understand the communications and the relationships na na-highlight din ng pandemic. Now, what are the real relationships of theater performers to its audience? And people to people,
Going
humanities.
to the universality of theater, I believe that in an ethnographic approach, that we are very varied when it comes to our understanding of performance, and each performance reflects the culture and the values of the community that nurtures it. So I believe that for this kind of community, there has to be some different form of meaning and representation in our performance. In the other case, just like how the Japanese no, for example, is entirely different to our theater that we are doing right now. So each performance has its own communal values reflecting on it. So I think that it's very difficult to attain that universality. But yes, now the idea here is the voicing of the human condition can be. So also there's a caveat in this one. In the case of our craft, the playwriting, compared to other what you call this people like politicians, they are very much palpable to the community. They are very visible. So in our case, the craft of the playwright is very peculiar one, because these are people who are on their room, secluded, writing about life in general. And in order for it to reach the engagement of the audience, it has to go through a lot of processes, a lot of hierarchy, even. Diba? So in the case of the politician, they can go directly to the masses. Diba? They're very palpable, they're very visible. So the challenge would be, how do we translate our plays to be like that? It's very visceral. Diba?
And reaches a lot.
Oh yeah, this is a lot of audience. So that would be the pretty much the challenge.
But talk about universality, di ba pang the popularity of the Korean film and Korean theater suggests that there is a kind of some values, some emotion, some structure that can resonate to different cultures, even though the setting may be a period Korean play or Korean characters or things like this. The theme of revenge, the theme of getting even, the theme of lost love, of betrayals, they seem to be kind of universal.
The idea can be universal, sir, but how the engagement and the understanding of that will be very different. Because, for example, in this cult community, revenge can mean something other than revenge. It can be a beautiful thing for them. Revenge is actually something that they would do. In this culture also, they have different values about revenge. So it's really varied.
Takot ako actually sa notion of universality, because I think any notion of universality is the tendency is to be blind kasi may assumption na yun na nga, universal siya, shared values siya. Pero actually, it's always a dominant culture saying what is universal. So in the end, hindi talaga siya universal. So I think one of the beautiful things na naisilang nitong online thing is precisely the democratization of storytelling, narratives, representation, right? And in fact, yun yung parang caveat ko coming from an artist from the NCR, na parang itong online theater na ito, lalo na ngayong unti-unti tayo nakakabalik sa teatro, baka dapat hindi natin ikalat yung boses natin dito sa online theater. Let others speak out naman. Tapos tayo, makinig na, they have to represent themselves, right? Hindi yung tayong, we overwrite their narratives. So yun din yung ano ko sa online theater, baka sila. Pero tayo, mag-on-site na tayo. Sumabak na tayo kasi yung online, baka pati yun i-colonize ng NCR artist. Kakadiri.
Or mix. Na-amaze ako while Neil was talking earlier how each community should have its own trade agency of how what is their cultural values in one performance. Whereas tayong lumaki sa NCR. Parang hinahanap ko yung ganon. Siguro na-amaze ako kasi nga, dahil taga-MSU siya, sa kanila, mas malawak yung, gawa kayo, tapos gawa ka tayo, tapos nood tayo ng isa't isa. Na hindi ko masyadong naranasan sa NCR. Na feeling ko, aside from kayo naman yung mag-online, what if there are like festivals?
Sana.
Na can be both online and on-site, na can be enjoyed by Filipinos, which is dangerous nga in terms of universality, because what is painful for us here in NCR might not be the same pain that they have in Mindanao or in Cordillera.
Well, there are festivals
versa.
just for Mindanao and there are festivals just for the Visayas. But what you're talking about is a more heterogeneous kind of
Yes.
format. No?
And multicultural.
Multicultural and multidisciplinary.
And you see, yung mga schools, universities, ito yung mga nakakaisip ng ganitong ideas. Paano yung mga cultural agency ng gobyerno? Sana naiisip nila ito, tapos, hindi ko lang sasabi nila naiisip, no? Pero sana meron silang capability na gawin siya.
Oo.
Kasi pag tayo maiwan to our own devices, wala tayong funds. Wala
Kanya-kanya.
tayong- Yeah.
Pero alam mo, mayroong mga may mga LGUs na malakas eh. Most probably, ito din yung mga LGUs kung saan may mga nag-aral sa universities and went back. Like, we have a friend in Binyan, Laguna, in Samar.
Yeah.
Pero yung iba, wala talaga. Ito yung mga politicians, yung bosses, na, which is also scary. Because they may weaponize performance. Diba? Yung mga Hermana Mayor, ganyan.
Yeah.
Sponsor ni Mayor ang pakain, ganyan. So, dapat
That's why, sir, the academe, no, this ivory tower should be broken down. No? That we should really engage with the community
Yes.
more now than ever.
Totoo.
Diba?
Tama.
Yeah, but then there must be mechanisms within schools that will allow us to do that. All right, in other words. But we have to think about how structures can be created. Not only within the school, but if we're going to talk about regional and multicultural thing, as I said, the government must form that kind of structure.
Agencies, no? Kasi, for example, tayo sa mesang to, we belong to actually, medyo lucky tayo sa mga institutions that we belong to. Paano pa yung hindi?
yung
Right?
hindi?
How do they get to participate in the discourse? Kasi tayo, di ba, parang medyo madali sa atin. Ito lang eh. Ito lang eh. Ito na yun, no?
This is where they found their home in the internet.
Yeah,
No, because they
precisely.
can really connect towards that bigger public discourse that's going on in the country. And yeah, what they get from news is they no longer see look at the mainstream media. They go towards the internet,
Yes.
and they become victims of propaganda machines.
But what's important is not only you see it, but somehow you have to assess it. Sometimes you have a meta think about it. Because when you see all these things coming, what does it mean? And what can we do? And how can we improve it? And how? So there must be some meta quality that will come out. So and maybe that's also the job of the university, of schools, to try to see in a cultural festival what has transpired, what is going on, what is weak, what is strong, and how it can be better.
We have to codify. Universities must codify the aesthetics that are emerging. Na parang wala pa tayong labels for it, wala tayong preset, we don't have textbooks for it, we don't have anything prior to, diba? So universities must act quick to codify, to be able to teach the emerging aesthetics and forms that are coming out.
Which brings us to, napansin ko lang, no, kasi ang Philippine Theater, hindi siya sanay mag-decode. Hindi siya sanay sa critique.
Yes.
Hindi siya sanay basahin ng iba. Na dapat sana hindi naman mawala, pero magkaroon ng pagiging bukas na basahin natin ng isa't isa, panoorin natin ng isa't isa at mag-comment tayo sa isa't isa. Because that is the danger and the gift of ephemerality of theater and performance. Na parang ang beautiful niya, ang sarap niyang maintindihan at maranasan. Pero pag nawala ito, wala na siya.
Yeah.
So, kaya totoo yung ang dapat maging mahalaga ang pagsulat at pagdokumento nito at ang pagiging bukas sa pagkritik ng isa't isa. Yun yung...
Good luck.
Recollect.
Talking about codifying the universities, diba? The university should be really very, very immersive and very grounded. Engage with people not only in their own framework, but understanding the other side, the other. Because we now live in an age of post-truth. But even fake news can be considered a myth, a truth.
Yes.
So these are the things that are really break the grounds of the academia and really reevaluate the way we see things and how we approach the masses. Diba? For example, in the past 2 decades, the Marcoses were deposed by the revolution, and then coming back now in this 2022 election, another Marcos will be, actually, he's now the president of the Philippines. So how is that possible? Diba? So that would really entail a different kind of understanding of the values and the culture that the communities have nurtured, the cultural matrix even. Diba?
Our time is getting on, and we'll try to wind up a little bit here. So maybe as during the conversation, we start with the online thing, and it seems we got deep into it, and in the middle of it, found many other issues connected to it. We hardly talked about the physical theater itself and the kinds of things we have to learn from it. Maybe that's for another discussion. But as we close, I would like to ask each of you again to review very quickly what we just talked about, and maybe what did you pick up from the discussion, what new ideas based on what your visions earlier and in terms of the context of our discussion. Do you see a connection between what you said earlier and this discussion and things like this? So what did you pick up from our discussion in terms of the future and what we see?
As Shakespeare would say, all the world's a stage. I believe that even our new platform is our new proscenium. And from this discussion, I really synthesize it as understanding, not only adapting and engaging new modalities, but also be conscious of its responsibility, how we would deal with it, and also be open, out of the box thinking, getting out of our echo chamber and engaging with the community. And this would be very demanding, I believe, from us, because this would really shake our yoke of complacency, and we really should be more engaged right now. The urgency should really be there in all our works, in all our productions, things like that. So, yes, it's very...
In fact, I'm thinking maybe the theater curriculum should have a kind of a community service, a community theater kind of internship before you graduate, the way physicians beforehand, and something like that people can immerse. But anyway, that's Neil's pick-up lesson. Anybody else?
I'll be very honest. This discussion, I didn't see this happening, but when this discussion, listening to points about online theater and that responsibility, right now, if I'm gonna be honest with what I'm feeling, may takot, may pangamba na, first off, will we actually learn anything from the 2 years where we're stuck at home doing Zoom thing and ganyan? Parang, when we come back to the theater, we're so excited to see our colleagues again, and then we get to rehearse and chit-chat and do all the socials, diba, the social part of theater. What if we slip back to, diba, old habits? So how do we stay, how do we stay alert, diba, that we actually learn from our experience? Kasi it's a trauma eh. I think as a community of theater makers, we are traumatized. When we were doing all our online stuff, it's a trauma response. It's a mode of survival, because part of our being is to communicate, tell stories, create. Hindi natin magawa sa bahay, so, di ba, ito na lang, Zoom. So, ngayong babalik tayo sa teatro, parang how do we heal ourselves from the trauma? We are not traumatized only by the limitations of our medium, but also by the events, the politics, sickness, the deaths that we've mourned for the past 2 years. So, how do we learn from it? And yung takot, Ricky, nanggagaling din sa, bakit ang laki ng responsibilidad ko? Ang global kasi nung problema. Pero parang neoliberal na naatang sa balikat ng artist ang magpatuloy ng laban. Biktima din ako ng pandemya. Ang dami ko ring trauma na kailangan ko ikwento for me to survive. So nakatingin talaga ako sa gobyerno, nakatingin ako sa institutions that have money and power, mileage na, how will you support now the theater artist? Give us resources, but at the same time, allow us to speak our truth. Speak truth to power. So those are the crises, I think. So what I feel in this talk is parang hamon. hamon siya. Akala ko magsa-summarize tayo na, ay, yung pala tutuan, ay, yung pala tutuan. Hindi, parang nakatingin tayo sa bangin. Hindi natin alam yung anong paparating. So, thank you, Ricky, ha? Hindi ako handa. Na parang yung pala yung...
Yung bangin, nakatingin din sa atin.
Nakatingin din sa
Nakatingin
atin.
din
Yung
natin.
void, di ba? Na parang, anong gagawin mo ngayon? So, takot ako. Yes, Katte, go.
Kasi nga sinundan ko na yun na ako din, although I would like to, nais kong magkaroon ng pag-asa that we are living in such an exciting yet very challenging times. And in this discussion, hearing from Neil and the Ateneo, which is of Guelan, at kami nagmula sa Tagaytay, ang laki ng trabaho bukod sa ng artist ng universities.
Yeah.
Na ng akademya na hindi magpaka-high horse na academe kami. Kundi magbukas para sa mga komunidad at mag-encourage na makinig doon sa iba't ibang agencies ng performances, not only on-site but also online, at mag-codify. Pero ang pinaka-kinakatakot ko ngayon na nabanggit mo ang gobyerno, bukod sa mga artists, sa mga manlilikha at guro, sana hindi tayo mapagod kasi nakakapagod. Kasi pwede namang bumalik na lang tayo sa kwarto. Tapos mag-online na lang. Sana hindi tayo mapagod matuto. At sa palagay ko, itong nandito tayo sa isang lamesa, ay sana hindi huli na magkwentuhan yung mga universidad at mga paaralan kung saan lumalago at nag-evolve ang knowledge.
Thank you, Katte. Thank you, Guelan. Thank you, Neil, for the discussion today. We began this discussion by asking ourselves, why is it important to imagine what Philippine theater will be like in the future? And we answered that because if we want to see change happen in the future, we must first imagine what we want here and now. And from this discussion, what do we want to see? What do we see in the future? Our discussion centered on the online format and to know its pervasiveness. And there is this vision that it will persist. And the hope is that it will persist as a genre of its own, not simply an extension of live theater, but something which can be used not only to deliver a diversity of voices, but also to experiment with new kinds of storytelling and new modes of presentation. And so there's this big challenge of training, of extending this kind of training to students and to democratize basically the use of online training. So many other groups all over the country, all over the world can use this format to be able to be heard in this new modality. But there's also a great deal of dread. And a great deal of dread because we do not know what will happen. We do not know how institutions will be challenged. There's a great danger of being weary and exhausted from this work, that we will slip to old ways and just let the money makers, the production of the things take place. And although we believe in entertainment as the kind of form that we should challenge and master, we also dread to see entertainment purely as a sanitary, hygienic form of entertainment that does not challenge the mind, that does not challenge the spirit. But the thing is, it's difficult to do that. And there are many things we have to learn and many things we have to do to converse with each other and continue this discussion so that we'll have more voices and more insights as we move on to work in Philippine theater. And on that hope that there will be more discussions and more talakayans about this topic, we bid you all for the moment good day. Thank you from all. Good everybody can say goodbye. Give us a long shot. Bye, guys. Thank you very much.